Thank you very much and good evening. I do want to start this, and I feel bad about it, but start with a little disclaimer, which is that this morning this talk was not written. And that is not because I was procrastinating heavily, it's because I wasn't doing it until this morning. So, this is a talk about not needing servers. It is not a very in-depth talk about not needing servers because I have not had the time to go into depth on it. It's more an, I'm excited about this, and maybe you should be too, and let's see what we can get out of this together. It's also a very good vehicle now for Back to the Future references, so... GIFs don't work exactly right, but if you can just imagine this starting again in a second. Servers, right? Where we're going, we don't need servers. And we're the people in the car, and the servers are roads in this metaphor. This is the best metaphor I've got today, so... Cool. Let's move it on. My name's Nash. I'm a developer evangelist at a company called Twilio. I've been trying to pepper this town with t-shirts for about a year and a half now, and if you haven't got one yet, I'm sorry. If you don't know what Twilio is, we're a communications platform. We're an API that you can use in your applications to send or receive text messages, make or receive phone calls, make video chats, other chat. We even have email now since we bought and swallowed up SendGrid. It's all part of Twilio, and you can use it in your applications using the tools, languages, and frameworks that you already know. If you have any questions about Twilio, or if you built anything cool with Twilio, do come and talk to me afterwards. I'd love to hear about it. So, let's talk about serverless, though. It's a buzzword. It's been a buzzword for almost 5 years now, which is quite impressive for buzzwords and how they run. Serverless, of course, doesn't mean there aren't any servers. There's loads of servers. They're everywhere. God. But what it means is you don't have to care about them. And that's the idea, right? Back 5 years ago, it was it was November 13th, 2014, when Amazon announced their service Lambda. If we jumped in the DeLorean here, as you can see, I was actually previously trying to get in early on Bitcoin back here, but time machines don't really work, so it's just a picture. But back in November 2013, Amazon went, hey, you guys like writing code and running it on our servers, right? But you have to start up a server, and you have to have an operating system and maybe some way of running the actual code, some kind of environment for that, and then you have to keep it running and all of that stuff. But what if none of that had to happen? What if all you had to do was write code and then we'd run it? And people kind of like that. And then they said, but you have to do it in Node, Python, or Java. And they went, well, the Node.js people and the Python people and the Java people were quite excited about this. Understandably. I mean, Node is all functions anyway. Python, people do that. And and then Java, this was the most confusing for anybody who's seen the JVM startup before, and they were like, you just have to run it in the cloud. And I'm like, no. But some people went for it. But for us, in Ruby land, we were like, no, this is not interesting to us. Not at all. Like I said, the metaphors stopped running at this point because he's about to call him chicken, and this doesn't... You worried about not running Ruby? Anyway. So, thankfully, after ignoring it for an awfully long time as Rubyists, back in November 29th last year, AWS said, I see you've been ignoring us a long time. Don't worry, now you can have Ruby 2.5 on Lambda. And we all celebrated, right? Or at least we maybe thought it was intriguing. Like maybe something to look into, maybe. This one takes a long time. Maybe, maybe something we should find out a little bit more about. We're not chickens. We want to find out about what we can actually do with Ruby on Lambda. Because the idea of running servers and putting things on them and keeping them up, I'm tired of it. And I bet you are too. So there's some things about building on Lambda. Issues in my mind. Because it's not a very clear platform. It's a different way of working. There's a complete lack of development environment. If you are to build if you're building an application that you want to actually have on the web with a URL, which I think is probably what a lot of us do, there is just complete lack of development environment. In fact, this is kind of the example code for starting a Lambda in Ruby. You just kind of define a function, call it Lambda handler, and then go. But like, if you want to hook that up into a URL on localhost locally, you don't have anything there for it. It's just running a function. That's kind of cool as well, but it doesn't become the environment that you want to work in if you're trying to put things behind a URL at the end of the day. Secondly, there's a complete lack of deployment. Now, I did, because I also dabble in the old JavaScript every now and again, did have a go at this when it was a Node.js product on Lambda. And deploying, you could do one of three ways. The first way was to write your code entirely in a text area inside the AWS console. Now, that's either like a really insane kind of idea of continuous integration, or just, I don't know, it's not a good idea. Plus, it's the AWS console. You'll find it once, and you'll never get there again. And second thing was the same thing, same page in the console, but you upload a zip file of all of your projects. This was useful if you're writing a Node script and you needed to include modules, other modules from NPM and things like that. Which, of course, if you're writing a Node script, you do. You need thousands of them. And so then you zip that up and send that several gigabyte file up to AWS via uploading a gzip file, a zip file, sorry. And the third one is via the AWS SDK. But because this was kind of new at the time, nobody had quite figured out how to do that yet. So there wasn't much tooling around for it. That tooling has, of course, improved these days. And we have things like Claudia.js, which works for JavaScript. We have a thing called Zapper, which does the same for Python and allows you to kind of build these projects on your local environment, have a local environment to test with, and then deploy it via a command line process. And there's also the serverless project, which kind of tries to span any of the available languages on Lambda. And that currently is quite good for Node. You can run a local environment with that. But for Ruby, really, it only does deployment. It can't run you a local thing. So deployment is still a bit difficult, still a bit of a pain. And then there's a project layout. Again, we looked at that like example code, and it's just like you have a file, you have a function, go. I would argue that a lot of us are very used to writing Rails applications. You know, we have a very big kind of layout for projects. We know where things are. We know what they do. We know how our models, our controllers, our views all fit together. If you're trying to replicate that into AWS and all you're told is def lambda handler and these two arguments, it's a bit of a pain. And so we are, in fact, spoiled when we're writing Rails applications, spoiled at least in our development environments. It's built for developer happiness, and we have things like convention over configuration. As I said, we know where our controllers are, where our views are. We know where we put stuff, and we know where to expect that in other projects. This may or may not be a good thing, but there are many ways to deploy. I mainly like putting them on Heroku, because that's just Git, and I like that. But it is kind of server full, I guess. A term I'm not sure anybody else has used, but it's worth it, right? Rails applications can be thought of as maybe a little heavy. They use quite a lot of memory. If you remember the old, was it Unicorn, the server, where the fix for the memory bloat was to kill it just every now and again, just because. That's not really it's not a great way of running things, I think. So what can we do? Maybe we want to try this new environment of just having code that runs when it gets requested. But we'd like to do that in a way that we're used to building applications. And this is kind of what I wanted. And I was very excited when I found late last year, Jets. Jets is a Ruby framework in the style, in a way, of Rails that will run your applications on Lambda, on AWS Lambda. And Jets gives you a bunch of stuff. It gives you models. The database, when you deploy to Lambda, is then backed by DynamoDB, the AWS database. It gives you controllers and views. It gives you routing, sessions, middleware, all the kind of things you're used to. It even gives you background jobs, scheduled jobs, tests, all sorts of stuff. It's a lot of things out of the box. I could describe them to you, but in fact, I'm just going to try and write a demo instead. All right. This was not working until I walked through the door this evening. So what we're going to do is we're going to start, it's a gem, I've installed it already, a gem called Jets. We're going to make a new project called Roro. And I'm just going to make an API one this time because it actually comes with Webpacker, much like Rails does these days. And I have no interest in seeing Webpacker do its thing whilst we're trying to get through this. I'm also going to change the database that I'm using in development. I'm not really going to use the database, but I can't work out how to turn it off yet. And I was having trouble with MySQL earlier. So we're going to say it's the database is Postgres. And this is going to scaffold us up a whole new application. There it is. It's going to install gems, and they already were installed earlier, so it happened really quickly. And And it gives us congratulations, you've successfully created our project, which is pretty sweet. Emojis in the terminal is what I like to see. So if I head into the project, we can then start up. I can type. We can start up, and it works exactly like starting Rails server, except the only difference is it tells you that Jets is now running, and it's on port 8888. So let's go check that out. Local. See, I'm used to 3000. But it's on 8888, and we get a nice welcome page saying, hey, welcome to Jets. You're pretty slow. All right, cool. So that's there. And it tells you some of the stuff here, right? It allows you to generate scaffolds for whole posts. So I've not seen anybody build the blog in 15 minutes with Jets post yet, but it should happen. Like I said, I'm not going to mess with the database today. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing with it. Instead, I am going to go back and I'm going to use some generators because they are useful. Oops. So we can generate things, and I'm just going to generate a controller called messages with a create action. And this does most of what you'd expect it to do. I say most of because the routes are a little confusing, a little annoying, in fact. So if we go here and we open that up, I'm going to start by heading to the gem file because I actually want to include another gem here as well. Oops. Because when I only have a few hours to come up with a demo, it's going to be a Twilio one, I'm sorry. Grab your phones, get them ready. So that's installed. But like I said, we've got the routes, and that, when you ask for the create method, actually this kind of happens in Rails as well. It says, hey, you wanted to get, right? And then it's not quite right either. And this is my first pull request I'll be making to Jets, which is to actually make it right a route that's going to work. That one will work. So let's go to our messages controller. We have our create action. It's right there for us. This is very familiar, right? This is a messages controller inside an application controller. We can write RESTful routes in here with a create. And if you were to generate that whole scaffold, you would get a resources route in this file. But right now, all I'm going to do is, this is for receiving an incoming message for Twilio. So I'm going to create a TWIML response. This is what we do to tell Twilio what to do with an incoming message or call, in this case, message, sorry, messaging. And then I'm just going to, I have to set the message to something. I couldn't work out what to do with this earlier until I came across a dad jokes API. And I thought, there's nothing Roro doesn't love more than a dad joke. And yes, exactly. Where I had to write that thing myself. There was a gem for it. Sadly, the gem's version of JSON. The JSON gem conflicts with the version that Jets wants to use, so I had to write my own method for this. But it works pretty well. And so we have this get joke method now, which I can just put into the body of this response message. And then, again, this might be familiar from Rails. You can just render XML or JSON or whatever you want from a controller action, or you can send it off to a view as well. In this case, I'm just going to render XML, and so that's what we need to do for that. So I'm actually going to deploy it. What? Yes, I did. Thank you. Cool, because this is a long deploy, and if I get anything wrong, you're all staying behind for quite a while. Cool, so I'm going to deploy it. I'm going to deploy it to production because I'm not messing around with any kind of development or staging or anything like that. Yeah, bundle exec Jets. Cool. That's better. And now it's going to package up our application. It's going to send it up to AWS. It's going to create an environment for us. It's going to do a whole load of stuff. But what it means is that we don't have to log into the AWS console and type stuff into a text area or anything like that. Instead, we're going to see quite a lot of this stuff. It's creating S3 buckets so that we can put some of the HTML files in there. It's generated 404s and 500 pages for us, so it can be served from an S3 bucket. It's going to take a little while about it.
Do you have any dad jokes ready?
No. Oh God, I thought about some, and then I forgot. But I want people to be able to search for them themselves. But let's get one out of the way just to make sure. I just got fired from a florist. Apparently, I took too many leaves. Okay, that's terrible. In the meantime, we'll install Nokogiri with native extensions. I actually think this is happening on my own machine. I'm not quite sure how this works, because ultimately Jets actually has to do some stuff, because on Lambda, where it's running, we get an Amazon Linux distribution, which is not like another Linux. So those native extensions don't necessarily work, and we have to compile them specifically for that. Thankfully, Jets has sorted this out and has a bunch of pre-compiled popular native extensions that will run on AWS or Amazon's Linux. And we'll see that come by later, because we have to now wait for Nokogiri to install. Does anybody else have any dad jokes before we use the API again? No, nobody. Come on. Yes, yeah, Andrew.
Is it one large?
As far as I can tell from the backside, it actually breaks it into a bunch of Lambda functions, which is quite exciting. The getting started with AWS and Ruby, or with Lambda and Ruby thing takes you through how to actually set up a Sinatra application to run in Lambda. But I'm fairly convinced in that case that it's one Sinatra application running in one Lambda, whereas this one does seem to create a whole bunch of different Lambda functions for you, which is really useful when things are not working, as they weren't earlier. Because you can check the logs for each specific function and see why it's broken. For example, if your dad joke gem is just not working with it. So now, as you see at the bottom, it is checking project gems for binary Lambda gems. So this is where it is reaching in and saying, hey, we're not going to actually be able to run that Nokogiri we spent a lot of time installing, so let's just switch it out for something else and get on with it. Anyone working on anything interesting? More questions, cool. The production config. So actually, Jets will create you. It works with kind of .env as a way of working. As you can see on the, you might be able to see on the side here, we've got a .env, a .env development, a .env.test. These are for local, and then you can actually create a. I've done it before. .env production. Something like that. You name the environment, the .env file with your environment name in it, and Jets will then put those environment variables up into the Lambda so that you can use them there. So that's quite useful of it, actually. It's a very nice way of dealing with it. Anything else interesting in here? We can actually have a look at the application structure. Again, as I said, it's pretty straightforward and as you'd expect from a Rails application. We have controllers, we have helpers, we have jobs. Application job is right there. In this case, inherits from Jet's job base, because these jobs are ones that can either run. There are decorators for the functions to tell it either to run on a cron cycle or scheduled once every 10 hours or once every whatever you want there. We have models, application record here. In the background, the gem file you might see there uses Dynamite, which is a connector to Amazon's or AWS's DynamoDB. It actually turns out that the controllers do actually ultimately use application or action controller from Rails to render things, which is cool, because actually it means that we're not reinventing the wheel here to render stuff, which is nice. And finally, you can actually get views. There's a create that gets created in that generation. We're almost complete. This is the last part, as it's creating those resources for us in AWS. Oh, the stuff it's been doing all this time. Well, we could have just uploaded zip files. What's actually nice about this, launched at the same time in Lambda as Ruby was, I think, Lambda Stacks, I think it is. It's an idea, it's where you put a bunch of resources, in this case our gems and our extra library code, that each other Lambdas can then use. So you kind of put it all in one place and then everything else can reach into it, which is a nice way of doing it. And so when it comes down to the actual Lambda, it's just the code we wrote. Amazingly long time, this one, isn't it? Oh, look at this. Sorry? I'd love another dad joke. Yes?
How do you find Will Smith in the snow? Look for the Fresh Prince.
And it does not take quite that long every time, no. It doesn't have to create all those things. But what's nice is it is now done, 2 minutes, 12 seconds. The application's pre-warmed. We have an API gateway endpoint because, of course, what happens is when you put something in Lambda, it doesn't even have a URL yet. So you have to sort out Amazon's API gateway in order to get you that as well. But now we have that. I can go to a telephone number I bought earlier and place that there. And what's going to be really nice about this is once that saves, this phone number, an error. Cool. Oh, because I put it in the wrong thing. Cool. I know how to use our console. It's going to save this time. There we go. And if you were to grab your phone and send a text message to this number, you'd find that you now have an on-demand dad joke service at the end of your phone. I'm going to do it just to make sure it's working, because send anything, because I'm not recording the responses. But what you should do is, yeah, you should find dad jokes as a service. No! The debugger went off. All right, cool. I'm not going to make you wait through another 2 minutes, but I wouldn't send one right now, because it's not going to be happy with it. 403. Oh, it's because I used the wrong URL. Yeah, that's right. Because it's at the messages endpoint. Somebody already sent another one. Send off the... This time, it'll use the right endpoint. It won't be an error. Everything will work out nicely. I got a message back. It says, I asked a Frenchman if he played video games. He said, oui. So I'm pretty excited, right? We built an application that looked a bit like a Rails application, but wasn't a Rails application. And now it tells dad jokes for us over the phone via Lambda and API gateway. I have some concerns with all of this, as you can imagine. I know. Not Rails concerns, though. It is new. It doesn't have concerns as part of, I don't know. It is new. Like I said, it's not quite reinventing the wheel. Action controller is being used to render views, for example. But this is relatively untested. And as I said, I'm kind of more excited about it than know a lot about it right now. So it's new and you might not know. Speed. Lambdas on AWS are charged by the millisecond. And Ruby is, maybe it's not the fastest thing going on. And if you're being charged by the millisecond, then maybe that matters. Although it is important to note that it is rounded up to the nearest 100 milliseconds. So maybe it doesn't matter, because sending a thing onto Lambda and it running in microseconds is not going to save you any money. That you can make Crystal do it, so if you really try hard enough. And then there is vendor lock-in. Now, I haven't mentioned the other big providers, and that's because they don't support Ruby yet. And so it means if you want to run Ruby in a large serverless environment like Lambda, Lambda is your choice. Google's cloud platform, I think, currently supports Node and Go, and Azure supports C# and Node and some other things, possibly Python, but definitely not Ruby. So we are kind of stuck with our choices there. What I'd like to see is those other platforms support it, and then Jets be able to maybe spread out the love, depending on where you want to send it to. There are some bonuses there, some good points. And one of the things is community. It's not a huge community right now, and by community, I really mean the maintainer. Because he's very quick. He's a guy called Tung Nguyen, based in San Francisco. He's written this as part of his company and supports it very nicely. I could not have done this demo the first time I played with Jets because it did not support rendering XML. I tried to find out where to put that and ended up getting lost in Action Controller. Went to the Jets forums, said, hey, I think this is missing. And 2 days later, a day later, it was fixed. It was pushed into a new version of the gem, and it worked. So it's a new place. It's a relatively friendly place, and it's a responsive maintainer right now. And secondly, Rails, why did I say that? It looks like Rails. Oh no, yeah, apparently, and I've not tried this, again, something I'm sort of excited about but don't really know, that you can actually use Jets to package up a Rails application and send it off to Lambda. So it is theoretically possible to take your existing Rails application and run it as a serverless project, which allows me to move into my final GIF of the evening, because I imagine that if you package Rails up and send it into a serverless platform, it would feel a little bit, just a little bit like this. I almost called the talk Rails where we're going, we don't need Rails, but that would have fixed this metaphor, but that's what I think it's like. Find out more. I recommend you kind of have a look at this because it's an interesting new way of running code. It's not that new, it's 5 years old, but it's new to Ruby now. And we can deal with this and it might help make our applications better. It might help break things apart. It might make things cheaper. It might make things just easier to run and less service to run. So check it out. It's rubyonjets.com. The GitHub repo is there as well. And I am likely to actually write something about this. So if you want to find out if I do, and if I blog about this, and if I get a little bit more into it, follow me on Twitter at Phil Nash. That is my exciting, what I like to think is exciting kind of frontiers for us now in Ruby. We not only have serverless available to us, at least in AWS's Lambda, we have a platform on which we can build applications that look like the ones we like to build, but run like the ones we want them to. So that is all I have for you this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Are there any more questions? Yes.
Didn't really hear those questions. Didn't really hear the questions.
So I got two questions.
Sorry?
I got two questions.
Questions. Go for it.
How does it run so fast? And what happened to your hair?
How does it run so fast? I didn't even hear that, sorry.
How does it run so fast and what happened to your hair?
I don't know how it runs so fast. I'm not, I have no idea. My hair, summer, you know, oh, it's hot. Or it was when I cut it, now it's longer again. I don't know. It's less hair.
Right.
Thank you. It's a whole new look for me up here, actually, as well, because I got these glasses like a week or so ago, and now it's terrifying, because during all of that 2 minutes of deployment, I could see your faces. And just thought it was supposed to be blurry up here.
Silly question, but how long are you going to leave the dad joke generator open?
Now I have to. I guess it stays there, right?
Sweet.
I should probably, yeah, like, save that number. It won't go away. It's fine, I work there, I don't pay for them.
Any other questions?
But yes, if you need a dad joke, remember that number is.
One more question. In terms of cost, how would it compare deploying to Heroku versus deploying to AWS?
That, of course, will entirely range on what your usage of it is. Lambda is quite cool because it comes with that sweet free tier of like 1 million requests and 400 gigabyte seconds or whatever they call for free. So you have 1 million requests for free to it, which is cool. Except it has to go through API Gateway if you're doing like an actual website, and that does cost after the first year at least. So, but that's like cents per 100,000 requests as well. So I think very early on, compared to Heroku, if you were going to run in a paid-for Heroku thing, this would be cheaper. I have no idea at scale whether functions or serverless kind of things would work better than running a number of dynos, but that's worth looking into. Yeah, I have no idea, but I would guess cheaper. I would guess that running on Lambda would be cheaper like this, because you're not paying to keep things going all the time, regardless of people visiting it or not. And you just pay for what you use. Like in Heroku, if you're running those dynos, if you're running those workers, you're paying for them at all times. And this is instantly scaling up and down, regardless of what traffic you're doing. I can't promise. That was one of the early promises of functions as a service in general anyway, was that it's going to be cheaper because you only run what you need to run. And it bursts and comes back down. Doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about auto-scaling because it's just running another function if one's already busy. So maybe cheaper, who knows? But you can't, or it will be difficult, of course, to write and find out that, because to put something on Heroku would be a different process to put something on Lambda, in this respect anyway. It would also be difficult to, like, you couldn't do it with Jets. If you had a Rails application that did work both ways, that would be an interesting test. But again, very much comes down to your usage. Anybody else still? Yes, there.
Hi. So it looked very Railsy at the end there. Like we have everything that we'd sort of expect from a Rails application. What are the benefits of deploying it this way versus deploying it like what we're used to in some sort of auto scaling setup?
Well, again, it's very much, you don't have to worry about the auto scaling. You don't have to put an auto scaler in there and worry and spin things up and have a cold start of those extra servers spinning up if you're under pressure. There are cold starts to a Lambda function, but they are much less than a whole new service. So the idea is, and again, I have not run this in production, so I take anything I say with a pinch of salt. The idea is very much that it is quicker and better to adapt on the scale, and then it is also less costly over time because you don't have to wait for that autoscaler to decide you're no longer under pressure and bring things down again. They just go away once they're dealt with. Cool, that looks like it. Well, thank you again so much.
Thank you.